I call myself a menstrual health and fertility coach. My business is the Body Bluprint, no E in blueprint, just to make things difficult. And I help women to either achieve pregnancy with fertility awareness or to avoid pregnancy without having to use hormonal birth control. My journey to becoming a mama wasn't easy. So it took about 4 years in total. So it sort of began, as I think a lot of women can kind of resonate with. We just sort of went into it thinking that it should happen normally and naturally. And then after about 12 months of things not really happening, I went to a doctor, and the doctor said, "You're young, you're healthy, go away and come back." So I kept seeking answers. So I went to another doctor who actually told me to go away and come back in 3 years' time. And at that point I said, look, that's not going to happen. So I went and started seeking some answers myself, and I found a natural fertility practitioner who introduced me to charting my cycles. So on top of the charting, we also uncovered that I did actually have some hormonal imbalances, and I was diagnosed with PCOS. So we started working really hard to address the root cause of what was driving that PCOS, and helping to improve my health and my diet and my lifestyle. Along the way, I did become a little bit, I guess, disenfranchised or a bit frustrated with the process. It still wasn't happening for me, even though I could see through my charting and I could see through my different blood tests and different things that were getting done along the way that I was improving and that things were getting better. I had a couple of rounds of IUI and IVF that didn't take. That was all sort of unsuccessful in terms of the traditional medical route. So we went back to basics and we said, no, let's give this another go and keep going along with what we knew was working. And we kept working with my naturopath on really good supplement regimens and good nutrition and good stress management and all the things I needed to do. And eventually, after about, nearly 4 years, we fell pregnant naturally with my little boy, Nash. And that's when I decided, well, after I was about 12 months postpartum, I decided I really want to help women sort of sidestep those challenges that I had and really understand their fertility. So I became accredited, and I'm actually 7 months postpartum with my second baby, which was really easy to conceive. It was conscious because I knew what I was doing and I had addressed those root causes. I knew when I was fertile and I was able to just easily make that one happen, which was nice. Two rounds of IUI didn't work and 2 rounds of IVF as well. So it was really, for me, it was I just needed to stay the course and address those things that we knew were going on, those hormonal imbalances that were going on. And when we really did address those holistically, that's when we saw the improvements really start to happen, and the natural conception occur, which was lovely. It's absolutely changed you could say every part of my life. Like I'm a totally different person to what I was before learning fertility awareness. And definitely not just about fertility, but good fertility is an indicator that your body is really healthy in every other way as well, in every other aspect. But even things like before learning about it, I just used whatever product from the store. I didn't eat organically. Like there was really no conscious effort put into any of that. And now that I understand how toxins can affect our fertility, I'm completely low tox. I try and eat organically. Like my whole lifestyle in terms of what I consider when I put into my body has completely changed. And in terms of I wouldn't say that I would be somebody that would go to the doctor really regularly before learning fertility awareness, but it was, a couple of times a year I might go with a different complaint or something. But now I'm so confident about what I'm seeing in my charts that I don't feel like I have to rush off to the doctor and get little things checked, because I understand how hormones influence my wellness. So I find that I'm just really empowered, not just with my fertility, but with my overall health, which is a really nice change as well. And that also then, reflects in my family and my husband as well. And, I'm learning how to treat things more naturally and live more in sync with my body too, which I love. Just in general, like, yeah, just aside from the TTC side of things, it's just that empowerment as well. And that's what a lot of my clients, what I work with them as a bit, I often refer to myself as a bit of their cheerleader. So we can see within their cycle, within their charts, what could be going on, and then it can guide the conversation. So you can go to a GP if you can't afford to go and see a natural practitioner, because they are a lot of the times a lot more expensive. If you've got to go the natural medical route because it's cheaper or because that's all that's available to you, you can go there empowered, knowing what you know about your cycle, because you have that level of understanding of your hormones and how they function and how they influence each part of your life and parts of your cycle. So you can look at your charts and go, well, I'm pretty certain that there's an issue here with progesterone. I'm going to go and ask for that to be checked. And you can go in there with that knowledge that there's probably a good chance that there is an issue perhaps with progesterone, because you really understand your charts and your cycles and your wellness. That's been the real game changer for me in all aspects of my life, that I guess that confidence that I have now to advocate for myself. Progesterone is one of those things that I see quite regularly in clients' charts. So we only make adequate levels of progesterone if we're ovulating. So that's something that we obviously confirm with our Tempdrop or with our thermometer. But for me, in terms of a chart and looking at that, if I had a luteal phase, so that second half of your cycle after you ovulate, that's less than about 12 days in length, that's when that would be a bit of an indicator that perhaps you're not producing enough progesterone. Some other things as well is like some spotting leading up to your period. So before your period begins, if there's extended days of spotting, that can be another indicator that perhaps progesterone needs to be looked at. Some other things as well I've noted in clients' charts, and also my own, is like lower than average kind of temperatures in that luteal phase as well. Sometimes that can be a good indicator that something's going on there, whether that's stress related, progesterone related as well. They're some of the key things that I look out for, that I notice within charts around that progesterone. But ovulation's a big one. More than sort of 2 days is something where I go, okay, well, it's sort of, I think it comes down to the context of the chart as well. Like you might have somebody that's got a beautiful, healthy ovulation every single cycle, and they always have a regular 1 to 2 days of spotting, and that's not something that I usually am that concerned with. It's sometimes sort of looking at it in all of the different elements of a chart, you might make sort of a different, understanding of it. But yeah, I usually say anything more than sort of 2 days of spotting. Usually 2 days is my amount that I go with. That would mean that I'd send someone off to just get that checked. Some people have regular spotting instrumental bleeding, so they might have it in the middle of their cycle, so it might be something to do with ovulation. It could just be that surges in hormones that happen in the middle there somewhere. I do have a few clients that have little spottings here and there, and that's generally when I would say, if it's frequent throughout a cycle, I would say just go and have that checked just to make sure. But yeah, it can be quite normal to have a little bit of spotting sort of in the middle of a cycle. But if it was sort of scattered throughout, sometimes that can be a cycle we're having issues with ovulation. It's not actually eventuating as well. I see that a lot with cycles that are anovulatory, regular spotting throughout the cycle. But yeah, if it's sort of just around that huge surge of hormones that happens around ovulation, it's not something that I'm usually too concerned with. But if it's regularly throughout the cycle, I would get that. When I look at a cycle, I look at so many different factors. So often you'll hear like a woman might go to a GP and say, I'm not getting pregnant. And the first question is, how many days is your cycle? Oh, it's 28 days. Oh, that's fine. Keep trying. But there's so much more to a cycle than just the length of it. So for me personally, I look at things like the first thing I look at is how long is your cycle? And if it's between sort of 24 and 36 days in length, that's considered a regular cycle as per I'm a FEM certified fertility awareness educator. So that's the FEM parameters. But the next thing I look at is that luteal phase. So that second half of the cycle. And is that, between about, even though FEM says 9, I like to see a luteal phase that's more around that 12 to 18 days in length. Is it nice and long so that we've got enough time for ovulation to happen, for implantation to happen, and for that egg to be held in place. So that's the second thing I look at. And then also we look at things like your actual period itself. So does it come without much fanfare? So does your period just arrive, and is there, a couple of days of medium to heavy bleeding and then it sort of tapers off? Or is it the sort of period where it's coming because you have huge crashes in your emotions leading up to it, and you have lots of pain and lots of clotting and really heavy bleeding? So those are all signs that there could be something a little bit off with your cycle and could warrant getting checked. So, we're looking at ovulation, our luteal phase, the period, and then we're looking at, you can even look further at, well, are you experiencing healthy cervical mucus throughout the lead up to ovulation as well? And, we're wanting to have enough healthy cervical mucus to ensure that ovulation takes place and that, conception is possible as well. So there's a lot of different elements I look at, but I always start with sort of how long it is, and then that luteal phase is super important, and then period as well. What we want to try and do, and this can be the challenging part, but aiming to have intercourse on the day before ovulation and the day of ovulation is going to be the best time, because that's going to give us the highest probability of conception. I can't remember the statistics off the top of my head, but the day before ovulation and the day of ovulation has shown to be the best time for sex to occur. When I work with clients, so then there's, it can be hard, right, to know, well, when is ovulation going to occur, because we can't predict when that's going to happen. We've got to look at our signs of fertility to tell us, that gives us clues that ovulation is going to be happening soon. So I generally say to clients to start having intercourse on alternate days from when you first notice some fertile cervical mucus. And then a bit of advice is alternate days, so every second day until you confirm ovulation. There's a few, I guess, caveats to that, because different bits of research will suggest that you do it each day. Others suggest alternate days based on sperm health as well. But so long as you're trying to aim to have some intercourse as close to ovulation as possible in that lead up, that's the best time. So yeah, absolutely. And again, it's something I see really regularly, especially with women with PCOS, or women that have just come off hormonal birth control to start a family, women that are in postpartum and hormonal imbalances. So the way I usually explain it to my clients is that, so we have this big symphony of hormones that happens each month, each time we ovulate. So when we have, I'm trying to work out how far back I'll go. So when what can happen is that cervical mucus is produced because our estrogen is it's gearing up ready for ovulation. So as our estrogen gears up ready to trigger ovulation to occur, that's when we notice cervical mucus at the vulva usually. So what happens is a cycle can have multiple attempts at ovulation. So you can have this gearing up of estrogen, and then we notice the cervical mucus, but for whatever reason, ovulation doesn't take place. So then that process starts again. So then it's typical, you'll notice a cycle or a chart that'll have patches of cervical mucus, and that's usually the body trying to ovulate multiple times. And usually what will happen is it'll continue to happen until eventually your body ovulates, and then the rest of that cycle plays out and a new cycle begins. But yeah, it definitely can be the case that you can have fertile cervical mucus and not ovulate, and that's why it's super important to confirm ovulation with a method like Tempdrop or your BBT thermometer, in my opinion. One of the women, the same situation, I would have the patches of cervical mucus, and I would think, okay, great. I've had, and this happens a lot where women aren't confirming ovulation. They baby dance when they see cervical mucus, and then they don't confirm with ovulation. They don't confirm ovulation, and then they actually miss their fertile window. So what I generally would say to clients that are having really long cycles is to remember first and foremost that fertile quality cervical mucus can keep sperm alive for 5 days. So there's really no need to be having sex every single day. Like, it's not sustainable throughout a cycle that could be 45 days long. And I do hear that recommended by GPs quite often, just have sex from day 7 or something through until day 20 something, and that's just not sustainable long term. So generally what I say to clients is to have intercourse when you notice the onset of like peak fertile cervical mucus, and have it sort of every second day or third day. But just remember and keep in mind that so long as you're having intercourse on those fertile cervical mucus days, and you're having it, a couple of, every now and then, it doesn't have to be every second day, and making sure that it's within that 5-day window until you confirm ovulation. You confirm ovulation, and then you can just relax for the rest of the cycle. It's very different. Like, each cycle is obviously very different. If you're somebody that has a hugely long cycle, it's going to come down to, well, I guess probably just aiming for the peak fertile cervical mucus days. Cervical mucus it's definitely the hardest element of learning fertility awareness, in my opinion, because there's so many nuances to it, and everyone's bodies are so different. So working with an educator, you can really get that one-on-one support to understand what's fertile to you, because what's fertile to you might actually be a little bit different to what's fertile to me. So it's really wanting to understand and differentiate the difference between what's your non-peak cervical mucus and peak cervical mucus, so that you can aim intercourse for the best days. But having said that, if you're feeling, if you're feeling really lost, I would definitely reach out to an educator. There's lots of us around, and lots of us have really quite, we keep our costs as low as we possibly can, because we want to make it as accessible to as many women as we can. So that's super important to remember as well. And there's lots of different instructors available with different methods as well that can really help you to understand that better. But I will say that all cervical mucus is actually considered fertile, even though we want to aim for that cervical mucus that's peak. As long as you're having intercourse within your fertile window, and when you're noticing cervical mucus, you're at your best chances of conception. And I can say that my 7-month-old, she was actually conceived sort of 4 days out from ovulation on what's considered non-peak cervical mucus. So it can happen. It's just it is helpful to be able to differentiate the difference, and getting that support from an educator is always going to help you get there. Oh, absolutely. Like, I often quote a research study that was done by Dr. Kerry Hampton, where she looked at women that had made it all the way to an IVF clinic, and they did this big study on, I think it was 300 women or so, and the couples that were there had made it all the way through trying to conceive for at least 12 months, and only 12.7% of the women that were there actually had enough information to be able to find their fertile window. So it is, it can feel a little bit difficult at times to learn it and to understand it, but it's one of those things that it's an investment in time, but it's usually only, it might only take a couple of months to learn how to properly chart your cycles. But once you've learned, it's a skill you've got for the rest of your life. And it's something that you can then use to avoid pregnancy without hormone or birth control if you choose to. But the other really great thing that I love about it is I can then pass that on to the next generation, and hopefully their body literacy and their understanding of their cycles and their journeys are going to be better than ours were, because I don't want that for my daughter. I want her to know her body, and I want her to be able to, conceive when she wants to.